Hello, everyone. Good afternoon and possibly good morning for some of you. I'd like to welcome you to today's CUGC Connect with FSLogix. I am Stephanie Boozer. I work with CUGC HQ, and you've probably heard my voice on several webinars in the past. So today we are going to be talking about virtualization, but I think we've also got some nifty sneak peeks at a new product launch that happened today. Before we get into it, I'd like to introduce our moderator. He is Tobias Kreidel. He is the Vice President of CUGC Steering Committee. He is also a leader of our Content Working Group and a CTP, and he'll be keeping an eye on the questions for you. So Tobias, would you like to come on and say hello and introduce our presenters today?
Definitely. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for the kind introduction. Welcome, everyone, today from wherever in the world you are tuning in from. It's a pleasure to have you here. I am very pleased to introduce today's presenters, who are David Young, who's the Solutions Architect and Product Champion at FSLogix, and he will be also working with Kevin Brown, who is the Federal Sales Director. And I understand much of our audience here is government-based, and I look very forward to hearing what great new and interesting things these gentlemen are going to talk about today. So with no further ado, please, gentlemen, take it away.
All right, thanks, Tobias, and I appreciate that, Stephanie. Good afternoon, everybody. Just wanted to kind of get started here. This is really my first CUGC Connect event, so excited to be part of that. Hopefully I'll get a chance to do more of these. We're going to talk about FSLogix and the digital workspace transformation. Really going to discuss better tools, methods around virtual desktop, application profile management, and apps themselves, mainly geared towards the federal government and state and local. There's the agenda. Please stick around for the demonstration and also the special product announcement that's going to happen towards the end. So let us know about that. Dave, can you flip to the next one? So FSLogix, one of the things that we do is we work with all the big vendors. So we work with all the desktop vendors in the virtualization space: Citrix, Microsoft, AWS, and VMware. We provide a high value. We know federal customers have unique requirements. They're very large, but we can actually help deliver on that. We do it today for our commercial customers. When you look at us in the workspace transformation, we know that there's things that have to be on-prem and off-prem, and there's a we can help deliver it. I want to introduce somebody that I've been working with for quite some time, Dave Young, who we've done this with over years and years of time. So, Dave, I'm going to hand it over to you because you have a lot to go through. If you can go ahead and get started on that, that'd be great.
Not a problem. Thank you very much, Kevin. So just for everybody that's been listening, Kevin and I's background, I just want to go through that just a little bit so you know where we're coming from. Kevin and I did EUC over at VMware, and we were very instrumental in the establishment of EUC at VMware in the federal space. So I had left VMware several years ago and was kind of done with IT. And a good friend of mine that I had met there at VMware, Mr. Kevin Goodman, he was my CTO for Fed, called me up one day and asked me what I was doing. Well, it was middle of August and I was hanging drywall, so I would have rather have done anything in the world than hang drywall at the moment. So I took his call and got to chat, and he said, "Hey, Dave, I got something I want you to look at." He's always known me to be a technologist, and he sent me some bits, and I was excited. Okay, so that's what got me back into IT. The thing I want you guys to all take a look at is our leadership. Okay, very, very important thing. One of them's got gray hair. Actually, two of them have gray hair. One of them's bald. One of them's got perfect teeth, but that's because he's a sales guy, right? The rest of us are a bunch of old guys and girls, right? We've all been doing this several times. So what that brings to the table is experience, right? We've been involved within IT for a long time. We've been involved within EUC for a long time, and we get to see different things. And as we do things over, you'll see that we always want to do them better. So very experienced leadership, very happy to be dealing with all these old guys, and it's leading to some very exciting things. So let's talk a little bit about our customers. We're all over the place. If you had to ask me, Dave, what do you think your 2 strongest verticals are? I'd probably really struggle with that because there are no verticals that we are specific to. We do have a ton of customers in finance, law, okay, and in healthcare, but we've also got customers, government customers, we've got logistics companies, we've got all sorts of stuff, right? Universities, we're all over the place when it comes to our customer base. Going on, and I think this slide is outdated because I think we just passed 500, but I'm not 100% sure, so we'll go with a 400, a good number of customers out in the industry. And when you look at our partner system, we've got a really strong partner ecosystem. Especially over in Europe, we really focus on making sure that those partners over there are doing the heavy lifting for us. But here stateside, we've got a lot of good partners. And I know that Kevin will be more than happy for you govies out there that want to know what kind of partners and contract vehicles and all those wonderful things that we're dealing with. He'll be more than happy to share that with you. But we are fully entrenched within the federal space when it comes to that. So some of our partners, right, that are alliance partners, right? As I was out in DC a couple of weeks ago seeing a cloud presentation, there's a lot of conversation around AWS, around Citrix, around, Microsoft, et cetera, and even Red Hat, right? And as we start to look at all this stuff, FSLogix is a partner of those major vendors, and we will become partners of others as time goes on. We just have to go through the validation process. But we do work in all those different dispersed environments. And as we look at transforming the workspace from physical to virtual or virtual to cloud or physical to cloud, we are your partner for that journey. All right. So it gives you that capability to make sure that what you're doing not only works in your legacy environment, but will work also in your future environment. So last architecture slide I want to show you is we are known by the community. Okay. One of the things I'll announce, if you don't know it already, Brian Madden, who everybody's probably heard of BrianMadden.com. He's actually an investor in FSLogix, and his partner Gabe Knuth actually joined the team about 2 months ago, maybe been 3. Time flies when we're having fun. But the industry knows us, they love us, they like what we're doing, and we get good reviews from them. So let's talk a little bit about the products, and we'll go into those. And then we will go on to the next step. I will do a live demo. I'm going to try and keep everything as short as possible today just to make sure that we have plenty of time for the special announcement. And I'm sure there'll be a ton of questions around that. So we have 4 major products: Office 365 container, the profile container, app masking. You guys are going to love that, and our Java control piece. So let's dig into what Office 365 container really does. The Office 365 container is really all about taking the data components for Office, Outlook, okay, data, OneDrive data, OneNote data, et cetera, and putting those into a container. And by putting those into a container, what that gives us the capability to do is bring that data back to the machine that the user's logged into and make it persist. So this gives us a very nice separation of the user's machine and the user's data. So now I can go from machine to machine to machine and always have access to my data. And why would I want to put my Outlook data in a container? Well, if you're dealing with O365 or any hosted mail solution, the number one complaint that the end users have is, hey, that's all fine on physical, but as soon as I go into my virtual desktop, it's choppy. You put me on online mode, or you do something crazy like put the OST out on a folder redirect. And when we do that, there's a lot of science that you have to pay attention to, like file opens and closes, and the fact that Outlook wants to open and close the OST about every other second. So if you calculate that out at 0.5 file opens per second or per half second, that comes out to be, for 1,000 users, roughly 500 file opens per second, 500 file closes per second. And as we look at that, you have to build a pretty hefty storage device in order to accommodate that. And with FSLogix, we transform what's going on within that file open and close, and we treat it as if it was local data. So now I don't have to queue on the storage system with all these file open and closes, and my performance is just magically 10, 100,000-fold better. It goes from being bad, almost getting fired, to nobody even realizes you fixed the problem because it just works as designed. So that's the Office 365 container. One thing I want to add to that before I shift on to another one is we also enable you to capture the components, the database, for search. So now you can actually take and turn search on for the user. If they're doing desktop, we capture the entire search database. If we're doing something like RDSH or XenApp, we only capture the Outlook data. So it really gives us the ability to address how that user's experience is going to go. Okay, so let's move on real quick to profiles. So profiles are the same concept, and actually were the driving design originally on what happened with Office 365. We've been doing profile containers for a while. The goal with FSLogix is to take all that profile data and insert it into a container. And by inserting that into a container, now what I can do is I can treat that data as if it was local. So one would say, hey, Dave, what about, roaming profiles? Or what about this other profile solution? And what about, UPM? All those products are fine products. The only thing I will say that is the most different between us and them is we optimize that experience. Okay, so instead of having to fetch and retrieve that data over and over and over again, what we do is we say, let's put it in a container and let's make it attach on login so that the data appears as if it's local. One of the things I think many people would agree with on the phone is, messy desktops are the evil portion of slow logins. Now, if you're doing folder redirection for the desktop, you can change that. But ultimately, all those small files transferring back and forth eat up a lot of I/O, okay, and impact my login times. And with FSLogix, I can put 10 billion files, and that was B with a billion, on the desktop if it would actually hold that many. And it doesn't change my login experience because all we're doing is connecting the container versus trying to do a whole bunch of fetching and retrieving of data. So it really changes that. One of our customers over in the UK replaced their roaming profile / UPM implementation, and they went from 3,400 users running 31,000 IOPS to 3,400 users running 2,500 IOPS. And ultimately what that gives you is I/O back to do more virtual desktops or more XenApp sessions or whatever it may be so that your user experience becomes better. So once again, like I said, what we do is we make that experience better. So let's move on to app masking. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the way we used to do things. We would design things sometimes based on what kind of user group you were in. Were you part of marketing? Were you part of accounting? Were you with legal? Those guys have some special tools. Or were you with sales, right? Clean desktop. So as we start to look at how we used to design for end users, we did a lot of siloing, right? Put 3 servers together, throw the apps out there because, this one app won't interact with that one app, and I have to make sure they're separated, and a big, very, very complicated world. With FSLogix, we say the heck with that. Let's do it the big, easy way, right? So we say, literally, let's take all those applications, right? You got 500, big deal. Got 1,000, big deal. Put them all into the image, every one of them. You basically, what you would do is you do a native install of the application, and then the FSLogix app masking portion would say, hey, what do I need to strip away from that application to make it appear as if it's not there? Okay, so ultimately you could literally take a machine, you could install Office 2010, Office 2013, and Office 2016 all in the same image, and then when a user logs in, they're a member of the Office 2010 group, they see Office 2010. They're a member of the Office 2013 group, they see 13, and so on and so on. And this gives us the capability to present to them what they need when they need it. And let's just say you had Visio in the infrastructure and you needed to give that application to a user. All you have to do is entitle them into a group. right? So I take Dave Young, I put his ID into the Visio Active Directory group that is tied to the mask for that application, and all of a sudden, I can now see the application. And one of the questions that would probably come up if I was actually reading the questions at this moment, and Tobias is probably watching those, is, well, isn't that a lot of stuff in my disk? And the answer to that is, yeah, it is a lot of stuff. But who really cares these days, right? Storage has gotten so darn cheap, and the ability to operate from a single master image, right? Literally making 1,000 XenApp servers identical, but serving up 500 different workloads or 500 different work environments from the same image. There are savings at scale that you can't even start to imagine until you get there, right? There's time savings, there's redundancy savings, there's load distribution savings, there's all these things that we get to take advantage of, right? And most of us are doing things like PBS, and so as we start to look at, how PBS does all that cloning, it's not that much net new data, right? Yeah, I may have one big master image, but the amount of storage that I'm utilizing to spin up 1,000 of those is far less than if I had 500 unique images. So as we start to think about that, it really does change what we're doing. And it lets IT getting a lot of flexibility in the infrastructure and what we're doing. So with that, I'm going to actually move into, I got a little bit of animation here. You can see I got two versions of, let me go back there. Sorry about that, guys. I got two versions of Adobe running on here. The use cases, I have Adobe Reader and I have Adobe Pro. I only want certain users getting Adobe Pro because it's very, very expensive. So I put those into a special app mask and entitle that group, and only those users get that application. Now, one more benefit that is not necessarily a technical benefit, but if you're at this level in your career, you're going to very much like this conversation, which is around license management. So as we start to look at license management, one of the things that we need to be worried about is that I may do something that's not necessarily right. There's two things I could do that's not necessarily right. I could include an application into an image, and even though the user doesn't have permissions to it, I might have to license it there. With FSLogix, it doesn't even appear in the file system to the user, so you're not worried about that. The other thing is be very aware at your device-based licenses. I will use Visio as an example. Visio with a standard negotiated ELA comes with a 5-device limitation. And that means when Dave is entitled to Visio, I can run it from up to 5 devices, meaning I can come from a 0 client, a thin client, my PC, my laptop, my mother's PC, my girlfriend's PC, and when I get to my girlfriend's PC, that's number 6, I'm in trouble. I've now violated my licensing, okay? And as we start to look at that, that's a huge issue. So with FSLogix, we can actually put caps on that. We can say, hey, only let Dave run this on 5 and then give him an error message when he gets there. Or, let's monitor that and do some reporting. Maybe Dave has a very legitimate reason why he needs to run it from all these different places. So as we start to look at the whole licensing and compliance portion of this, FSLogix gives you the capability to have a very simple license audit session. I actually got to work with Microsoft over in the UK on an audit with a customer that was a very early adopter of app masking. And Microsoft was all confused. I sat down with their people, explained it to them, and they went, wow, that's awesome. So if the user's not in the group, there's no way they can have the application. So all we have to do is count how many users are in the group, and that's it. And I said, exactly, right? From a customer side of it, the benefit is you can actually run a report that will tell you when the last time a person launched the application to consume a license, and you can set high water marks. You can say, you know what, I have entitled this to 1,000 people, but I've been watching this, and I'm only using 400 licenses. That's a heck of a reason to have a new conversation with the licensing people when you come up on your renewal. You may want to change what you're doing, especially on some of these very, very expensive applications. So it gives us the ability to very, very quickly deploy applications with really zero weight to the end user. The old way of deploying applications was the user would call up and say, hey, Joe, I need, Tobias, hey Tobias, I need Visio, right? And Tobias will say, okay, let me queue you up in whatever system we have to get Visio. It would trickle out to my machine, and about 3 days later, if I was lucky, I would have Visio, right? Tobias did me a favor. He gave me my application, but it didn't get it to me in time to go into my meeting in 15 minutes and do a presentation with Visio. So now, literally, that conversation changes. Everything's pre-staged. I call up and say, hey, Tobias, I need Visio. Tobias says, okay, Dave, and he puts me in the Active Directory group. Just log in and log out and log back into your machine, and you'll have it. I log out, log back in, and boom, I now have Visio. Whether I'm physical or virtual, I can actually make that transition that fast. So it really changes the foundation of what we're doing with our applications. The last piece of product that I want to talk about is our Java control piece. This, for me, is the most exciting product out of all of them, just because I used to have to deal with Java problems. I worked for a very large bank many years ago, and we had Java systems developed that some were older than dirt and some were brand new, right? And as we start to look at that, what that meant is I had, as an IT director, a mess to deal with, right? So with this little cool rule editor, what we can do is very simply, I can take a application or a URL, type in its parameters, and I can get as broad or as specific as I want and assign it to a version of Java. So like here you can see FSLogix.com. I can say, hey, anytime I go to FSLogix.com, I need to use 1.4.219 and assign that. Anything else I open would go to the highest version on the system, right? Well, hey, you know what? I need to go to nasa.gov, and it works or only works best on 1.6, right? So we would assign 1.6 as the version to operate on. And I need to go to NIH's website, and it works on 1.4.2.19 32-bit or 64-bit, whatever it is. So I can assign these things based on what I have to allow, right? Old phrase, an old buddy of mine that used to do firewalls, he would say, Dave, you can't deny what you must allow. And ultimately, this is a production work application. And as IT members, we can't deny that. This is what the end user needs to get their job done. So we have to figure out how to allow that and how to allow it in a very safe manner. So the Java control piece gives us that capability. And if this takes you more than 3 minutes to set up, seriously consider what you're doing in IT, because it's really simple. You write a rule, and boom, off you go. So that's the high level on the products. I want to talk a little bit about how it comes licensed and all that good stuff. Ultimately, we we license this as a suite or as individual components. And as we start to look at the individual components, it gives us the capability to buy what we need. Sorry about that. I had a little tickle. So let's just say, out of everything you heard me say in the last 15 minutes, you were really interested in our Java control piece. You could buy just the Java control piece. And let's say after doing the Java thing, you're like, you know what? I like the O365 thing. That project came up. You can buy just that piece. Or you can buy the whole suite. It's up to you. We do license per product per year per person. So as you start to look at that, you can decide how you want to address that within your environment. So it gives you a very modular way of addressing the problems. This isn't a rip and replace. We've got a ton of customers that love what we do for profile containers, but don't want to replace what they're doing for their user environment management, right? They want to keep those rules in place, but they want it faster. So they want to put us as a profile container underneath there. So it gives you that flexibility to make it fit into your environment as desired. So I'm going to escape out of the PowerPoint for a minute. I'm going to do a quick demo, and I will show you how we handle all this stuff for the ODFC stuff, and then we'll show off the profiles, and then we'll do a little masking. So let me get in there real quick. I'm going to just kick up my script that I have that'll launch everything I need so that we can show this off. So the most important thing I'm going to establish as we talk about this is the fact that FSLogix does not change the functionality of your apps or of your data or anything like that. All we really change is the location at which it's stored. Okay, so if you keep that in the back of your mind, it will make total sense what we're doing. So what I want to show you is under the covers, what we're doing is we are basically putting all the user data into a VHD, right? So here you can see I have my ODFC VHD and I have my profile VHD. And you can see over here, I have the app data local Microsoft Outlook path, and I'm actually click on the Outlook path. And as soon as I click on the Outlook path, I'm actually entering into that VHD. And that VHD is actually mounted as a symbolic link or a junction, if you remember what those all are, on the system. So here you can see I have my O365 for my demo user. I'm actually going to assign a drive letter to this just so that we can take a quick look at what it looks like inside. And what you will see is if I add a drive letter, we'll change the E drive, we'll go in and we'll explore it, and you'll see that it is just a VHD with some data in it, right? Nothing really fancy. Here's my ODFC data, boom, boom, boom. This folder right here should look the same as this folder over on the right, because this folder on the right is an interception point showing the data of the folder on the left. That's all we're doing. And if you look at this from a command level, you know, on the high level, it's hard to tell anything's going on. But if we drop down in the command prompt here, you'll see that I have things mapped. Like here I have, let me just highlight the Outlook one, sorry about that. So here I have Outlook going to disk volume 4 ODFC, right? I've got my OneDrive stuff going to disk volume 4 OneDrive. I've got my link stuff going to disk volume 4 Skype for Business. Okay, it gives me the ability to do all these intercepts, and that gives us the capability to make this data join just in time when the user's logging in. So one of the things that I get asked here often is, well, why can't I just create a login script with a junction and mount a VHD? And the answer is you can do that. Update your resume before you do that, because it will turn around bad for you down the road. And what happens is you end up with this junction that looks like this. Okay. Notice I see the word junction here. Notice that I see all this information here. Okay. That stuff makes things by design not work. Makes Office in protected mode not work. Makes OneDrive not want to, allow you to click next, right? It makes Adobe Pro or Adobe Reader not want to work in, I think it's called low integrity mode. All these things won't work as desired, right? And that's what's going to get you in trouble, because yeah, the data will be there, but these other things that are very important to the end user aren't going to work. So let's take a look at what an FSLogix VHD mount looks like. So here we have the Outlook folder, right? Notice that that just shows up as a directory. And because it just shows up as a directory, now the applications just work. Now we're doing a ton of work at the filter driver level to make sure that it looks like just a normal local directory. But ultimately that work is what allows this to just work. And it gives us the capability to make sure that we're taking all the right registry keys, we're taking all the right components, et cetera, to make those applications work. An example of which, I'm going to fire up my Outlook here. You'll see I've been going back and forth with Mr. Gabe Knuth on some slides for today's presentation. I'm actually going to change from that. We're going to go down to some other emails. Notice how fast this is going, right? Because I'm local, right? It's just doing its thing. It's just like mail's supposed to be. This is all cached locally. It all exists, et cetera, right? So from that perspective, that data is actually going across the wire, going out to a network share, reading it as it's connected to that VHD. Take a look at this. I'm going to fire up OneDrive. So I launch up OneDrive. Let me actually minimize Outlook, get some real estate back here. Fire up OneDrive, says, hey, I'm all set. Let me just go in here and yeah, OneDrive. Let's go to it this direction. Notice in my OneDrive, there's my stuff, right? If I create something new, and let's go ahead and create a new file. We'll do a Excel. we'll do a publisher document, and we'll call this RY, and we'll hit enter. Boom, boom. It's going to take a moment, and it will eventually turn green. And that's, turns green is when it gets replicated out to, the OneDrive cache. So everything's working as desired, right? I don't have to retrain my user. I don't have to bring in some crazy new product and get them used to that. It all just works as desired. So as we start to look at that stuff, those are important things. I don't have to change the user interface. I don't have to wait, for replication to take place. And I don't have to wait for downloads of large amounts of data. So with that, I'm going to pause for just a second. I'm going to transfer. I think I have one more. Nope, that's the end of that. I'm going to actually open up the same portion where I have the same discussion around profiles. So what we're doing with profiles is I'm intercepting the profile for the user. Where is that contained? That's contained in the VHD right here. And if we actually go to, we'll go to C:\users/ not X, because X doesn't exist. This is why we sometimes like to record demos. We will go to C users. There we go. So you can see here, I have, as soon as I enter this folder right here, boom, I'm into the VHD. Now, one of the things that you would have noticed here, if you're paying really close attention, is this local _ demo user. This is stuff that we determine we don't want to keep in the user's VHD. This could be internet cache, this could be downloads, you name it. It's up to you what you want to customize this to be. Ultimately, you use a tool of ours called Redirections.xml, and you say, hey, I don't want C users, %username, appdata local, tiddlywinks, right? I don't want that included. I want that discarded when the user logs out. And boom, it would get discarded when the user logs out. So that gives us that flexibility to maintain a little bit of that, I call it Windows rot, that happens over time where the profile gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, right? Gives us that capability. So that's it on profiles. I'm going to pause before we go to app masking and ask Tobias if he's got any questions.
Yes, have a few here. First of all, have you come across any customers that requested your help that had a stalled or troubled migration of one or more applications into specifically the AWS cloud due to their lack of planning and testing ahead of time around end user profile issues, folder redirections, and such that were not taken into account?
So the short answer to that is absolutely. We do a lot of stuff on that, and we kind of become the emergency fix, right? A lot of our customers that get into that scenario, and it's not because of IT's fault all the time. Sometimes it's because of something that was thrown to them by IT management they weren't ready for, et cetera, et cetera. So when we get to that situation, right, we get pulled in because everything is so simple for us to do. We become an emergency fix. Now, am I going to be able to, turn a profile into 0 bytes of data? Not today. That's a situation you're stuck into. I can't fix that for you. But if you say, hey, I've got poor performance because of XYZ and we need help, absolutely. We help with that all the time. I have customers not even going to the cloud that start doing this. My customer over at Holster Okami, 31,000 IOPS, right? They were eating IOPS up like they were donuts. And they called me and they said, I've been reading about this. This sounds too good to be true. How does this work? They were so excited. They literally turn those excess IOPS into user performance enhancements, right? So from that perspective, yes, we do get those. So we are more than happy to jump in and help you. In order for you to get that help, I was going to cover this at the end, but I'll hit this right now. It's going to be a very easy project for you, okay? We take less than 3 minutes to install, and if you type really slow, it might take 3 minutes to configure us, okay? And you're off and running, right? I'll actually show you what it takes to set this up. So I talked about the 3-minute install. You're just installing a filter driver, right? Very, very small thing. I mean, it literally just, you hit next, and off you go. You might have to reboot, might not, depending on what's going on with your machine. We try to keep it from having to reboot, but you might. And then you're going to set some keys. So for like ODFC, I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to tell it if I want to roam search or not, and I'm going to tell it where to store the VHD, right? What file share do I want to put it on? I might want to tell it how big I want it to be, right? For profiles, it's the same thing. It's a different set of keys, but it's the same kind of settings. You'll see here when I go in here, there's profiles. Give me just a second. Okay, I've got the delete local profile when logging in, right? If VHD should be working. I've got it enabled, right? I've got some folders that I, might tell it to remove, and here's my VHD location, right? Literally that fast to set up. Now, whether you do this straight in the registry or you do this with GPOs or GPPs, that's all a religious discussion to have down the road. It doesn't matter to us as long as we can set those values on the machine so when the user logs in, we can take actions on them.
Great, thanks so much, Dave. That's appreciate your going into the details there. Here's a question that's related to storage format. Namely, is there a reason that VHD is being used instead of Vhdx?
The real reason is it's faster on a presentation for me to say VHD than it is to say Vhdx. So that's why I set this whole thing up with VHDs. But ultimately, the bottom line to that answer is no, there's not a reason. There are Microsoft reasons, okay? OS limitations. Windows 7, Windows Server 2008 R2 only support VHDs, and they only support VHDs on 512 sectors.
So this is uniformly designed so that it will work over essentially any kind of platform.
Exactly. I encourage users, if they don't have a Windows 7 2008 problem, go with VHDXs, future-proof yourself, right? The biggest difference between VHDs and VHDXs are 2 terabytes for VHDs and just shy of 64 terabytes for VHDXs.
Okay. Are you currently working with any enterprise customers who have officially started an all-in migration into AWS, helping them understand any profile management requirements with individual applications to help reduce the risk in their migrations? Have you encountered anything like that?
So yes, we have, and if you contact us, I'd be more than happy to discuss the specifics around there. And you're going to see here in a few minutes some ways that we help with that even more. Okay, so for the person asking that, please reach out. You'll get a link, high level at sales@fslogix.com, and let us know, and we'll get in touch with you and work with you on that project to help you along with that problem.
Great. With regard to the optimization that you provide with the profile containers, do you have any kind of an idea as far as how the efficiency of the caching works in terms of, is there a way to, for example, look at any metrics that would tell you what your cache hit rate would be on reads? And then in conjunction with that also, how dependent is the performance as a function of where exactly your data are being stored? In other words, do you see significant differences whether the data are on premises or cloud-based?
So there's a lot of questions in there. High level, let's talk about the efficiency, okay? I'll go back to Holstebro Commune, right? 31,000 to 2,500. The reason I know so much about that one is because I thought that was marketecture. And when the marketing guys published that, I was like, well, that can't be right. That just sounds too good to be true. Called our CTO on it. Excuse me, not our CTO, CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, Brad. And he said, well, Dave, why don't you talk to him and make sure it's right? Because the last thing we want to do is, tell stories to the world. So I got to working with them, did a full in-depth analysis of their past storage behavior and did an in-depth analysis on their current storage behavior, and it was true. It was absolutely true. And here's the easiest way to get your head around this. Let's just say I have a PowerPoint that I have on my desktop let's just say I've been working on it for a week and it's 100 meg. Every time I log in with any legacy type product, I am grabbing that file, reading it from the storage, writing it to the desktop, which is technically writing it to the storage again. And then anytime I log out, if I made any changes to it, I'm doing the reverse, right? Reading it from the desktop and writing it to the remote storage. So I get a 2-for-1 tax on that. With FSLogix, we remove that, and we remove if I don't touch it, I don't read it. We remove, and you'll see here that if I only open, notice I have the install here on my desktop for OpenOffice, right? It's only 136 meg, but you guys work with me on this. Let's say it was Office, right, at 3.8 gig, right? As soon as I double click on that folder, if it's on a remote share, I'm transferring a whole ton of data. If it's a DVD, I'm transferring the entire DVD across the wire, right? With FSLogix, when I click on that, the only thing I'm transferring is enough data to do a read, right? What is there? And if I came in and read this setup INI, notice I do this often, and I add a change here. Let's add change 6, right? I add a change and I hit save. I'm only saving a small amount of blocks of data. I'm not saving the entire file, right? Because I only changed some small blocks of data. So it really changes what we're doing, okay? When it comes to storage on like Azure and AWS, hold that thought until the next portion of this, because there's some details in there that you're going to be very interested in. But ultimately, because we changed the way writes take place and reads take place, it will change the behavior on your storage. Now, with all that being said, I want to make sure I throw out one quantifying piece of evidence that will change your results. I have customers, I'll just tell you the story. I had a customer, banking customer, said, Dave, we want to be able to connect to our profiles across the wire. So what do you mean across the wire, right? From, the, PBS machine to the storage? And they said, well, we want some more wires in between. We want to go from New York to California. And I said, okay, how many milliseconds of latency are you running? And they're like, we're running, I'm just going to make up a number, 30 milliseconds, right? And I said, oh, that should be fine, right? Now, the big concern that you're going to have is how much bandwidth do I have, right? So if I've got 1,000 users, let's just say all pulling 100K, I need to have enough bandwidth for that to be snappy. Latency is not going to bother me on that. Okay, so those are things that we all need to think about as we design this. I will encourage you to go see 2 videos. I'm going to ask, I'll see if Tobias wants to Google them while we're talking. There is a video by James Rankin. If you just Google James Rankin, FSLogix, and Azure, you'll get a pretty cool presentation that James Rankin did that was basically connecting a profile via Azure file stores, okay? And if you Google the same type of thing and you do FSLogix AWS file systems, you'll find, and Jim Moyle is on our team who did this. Jim Moyle did the same thing for AWS, right? So yeah, it works without a doubt. Now you got a lot of things to think about here, right? But definitely will work. And you're going to see from the FSLogix perspective, that is something that is very highly interesting to us. So with that, I'm going to pause for one more question, and then we'll move into the apps piece, because at this rate, I'm going to be about 25 more minutes, and I think everybody's going to want to hear the next portion. So anything else, Tobias?
Okay, let me just throw one quick one out, and if we have time at the end, we might be able to entertain a couple more. One question is, what about the ability to interact with license key servers, like, for example, Sassafras KeyServe? Is this something that can be integrated so that you can launch applications that depend on keyed services?
From the FSLogix perspective, we don't care.
Okay.
So if you have an application, you want to entitle it to 100 users out of 1,000, that key service piece is still going to kick off, right? Okay. We're not going to touch that.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I'll let you get to the exciting part here and have at it.
All right, well, we have one more boring part, and I'm going to do that really quick. And when I say boring, this is the app masking piece. I'm going to hit this really, really fast, and then we're going to get on to the exciting part. So here you can see I've brought up add remove programs. Here you can see if I get down there fast enough once it refreshes that I have Office 2016 installed natively on this machine. I didn't do anything extra. This is actually an AWS machine, and they just shipped it to me with Office 2016 on there. So there you can see Office, whoops, if I highlight properly, you can see Office 2016. We're going to go in, we're going to create a rule because I don't want all my users having Office 2016. So I'm going to hit new rule. And if you had done this without virtualization, it's time to go get a coffee, right? Don't go get a coffee, anybody, because here we go. So we're going to call this Gov, CUGC, and I'm going to put some random numbers and letters in there. There you go. You know I'm not making it up. I'm going to hit enter. It's going to come up and it's going to tell me to select your application. This is usually the longest part of the whole process because I usually scroll past it a couple times, and we're going to try not to do that today. So here we go. There is Office 2016. I select that. I hit scan. Still no coffee. Don't be a coffee drinker right now. You'll see that it takes roughly about 45 seconds, and I hit OK, and I will get a rule set back, roughly 342 rules. Okay, so let's make the magic happen here, right? So for this, I'm going to move this, which is the directory that Office is installed to the top, because I want you guys to see this. I'm going to put this rule into test mode. This is basically saying apply this rule for this session so we can see what's going on. So I put it in the test mode. It's actually asked me if I really want to do this. I tell it yes, and here we go. Watch the desktop, watch the icons, etc., etc. So icons down here at the bottom all turned white. Okay, there's no more file association for those icons. Now, if we were logging in, those would not be there because that's held within the cache. So look at the folder for Office. It's empty. Nothing there on the file system. Let's go back to add remove programs. It's still there, but let me refresh it. Look at what happens when I refresh. It's gone. Now, just in case you went to get coffee because you didn't believe me, I'm now going to take the rule off. We're going to reverse all this, and you'll see, boom, folder's back with data in it. Come back down here and refresh this. My icon's down at the bottom refreshed. Let me refresh this, and Office is right back on there. So to use this rule to my advantage, how I would do this is I would say, let's assign this to a user. I'd say assign this to everyone, apply this rule to everyone, which is what 110 is. And then I would add a group, and I'd say something like, there's a whole lot of things I could do here, but let's just do a group, and let's call it Office 2016. So this would be an Active Directory group I'd have, and I'd say don't apply the rule to the Office 2016 users. So default for everybody logging in, deny, but only those users that are part of Office 2016. I can do the same for Adobe, et cetera, et cetera. So it gives us that flexibility to customize that image for the user logging in. Any questions on that, Tobias?
Yeah, if you have multiple FAT applications in an RDSH environment, is it possible to pull an update on an application and then push it back with a minimal amount of interruption during that process as far as the users are concerned?
So there's a couple ways to approach that. Some of my customers say, hey, we go through publishing our base image once a week, for example, right? And they incorporate that all out in once a week. There is the other side of that of, hey, we do massive app pushes. Let's go with once a month. And this user needs this update right now to make it happen. So yes, you could apply that to that machine typical way, right? That, app management happens because it's going to appear that way. It's going to appear as if it's an app there. And when those users that are entitled to that application see it, they would be able to take advantage of it. It would flush out of your image, on reboot, but yes, you could do it that way if you desire. All right, let's go back, and we're going to go back to the slideshow because that's where the real important information is. So let me get into there, and we'll pick up where we left off. And we have completed the demo. Let me just make this large, and we'll go into the next portion. So it is my honor today to talk about a new product that FSLogix is adding to this set of products that we do. So we're going to talk about our Cloud Cache driver. And what does that come from, right? So we've been watching the trends in the industry, right? It seems like desktop virtualization and cloud with desktop is just way up there, right? Cloud's starting to become a bigger thing that we're all preparing for, and our customer needs are mixed, right? So a little data, right? If you look at this, and I'll let you take screenshots of it and go analyze it, but ultimately, only 23% of the infrastructure is not interested in cloud desktop. Everybody else out there, 77%, have reasons that they need to go do something with the cloud, right? And as we start to look at that, you got AWS making a big play, you got Citrix, Google, Microsoft, VMware, anybody else that's doing something around cloud desktops, they're all making these big plays, right? We've got newer providers that are making an impact. We got Frame, WorkSpot, Teradici's coming out with cool new stuff. Everybody's making a play on the cloud because it seems like, hey, if I don't go virtual, let's say I'm physical and I don't go virtual, my easy step is skip virtual and go cloud, which is virtual too. So there's a ton of interest here today, which is really driving what we're doing, right? We've got adoption increasing. You can read these numbers yourself. You can see what it is. But the ultimate thing I want you to think about is the bad side of this, right? Money spent on wasted, unused resources, all right? And specifically around storage. And let's look into that storage number specifically, right? As you start to look at these, ultimately the storage is a very expensive component. And if we can optimize what we're doing on that storage, we can now save you money, right? We can increase the user's performance, but we can also save you money. So as we look at that, the FSLogix approach to this is how can we optimize your data rights for that container to that storage array so that you get the best price possible, not the, hey, I got the default price because I didn't do anything. So ultimately, this gives us the ability to start tweaking that, right? And what we heard from our customers is they wanted options, right? The number one option I heard, and it's actually listed last here, is platform portability, right? I don't want to be stuck on AWS and have to figure out another migration if something happens to AWS and I have to go to Azure, right? I want to be able to have platform portability, right? Disaster recovery was another big one, right? The challenges, right, around moving our storage to the cloud, right? And ultimately making sure, and this is in my mind the most important, that that user's profile is available whenever they're logged into the machine. So you're going to see some of the things that we're doing here. So off of that, we announced our Cloud Cache product, okay? And what Cloud Cache is going to give us the capability to do is enable a layering approach of local cache, right? We can enable that to the cloud, right? We can enable that to our local data center. And what that gives us is a changed way that we're writing to that storage. So ultimately, you'll have a VHD out in your storage array, okay? And we will cache reads and writes locally. And then we commit those on a set schedule. We've got some special sauce there as they become enough information that we need to actually commit the writes, and we pull more as we need to go get more. You go from the PowerPoint to Excel spreadsheet, we're going to have to pull more data. And we keep that all in the local cache, whether it's on your physical machine, on your virtual machine, your cloud-hosted desktop, it doesn't matter to us. It gives us that capability to say, hey, let's put a little data locally, right? A lot of data remote. And we just keep pulling from that and utilizing that. So that gives us the ability, as we start to look at what's going on, how we're going to address that, right? So there's a little bit more, right? So the first part I talked about, all is included in the product, right? A little of high level what we do. We can have multiple storage locations, and this will be in the enhanced version of the product. So right now, the big box is up in the middle. That's your data center, right? You can do that all day long with existing, products that you've bought, right? And you can cache there, and you can run that, and boom, we're going to absorb any storage hiccups, right? Storage controller fails over. You don't want 5,000 users having to relog into their desktop or relaunch OneDrive because the storage hiccuped up. So we're going to absorb that stuff by changing where the commit layer takes place. But then let's just say down the road, you decide you want to go AWS on this, right? You would add a storage destination to your config, and we would start writing data to the AWS storage infrastructure, right? And we will read from the primary, but write to all of them so that you can say, hey, I added AWS, I want to add Azure now, right? And you can have literally local cache, AWS cache, and Azure cache as locations of where to write this data. So it gives you that flexibility. You can set this up on a physical desktop, right? And start to use this as a way to enable you to prepare your desktops for the cloud. So let's dig into that a little bit, right? So with the enhanced continuity, right, a little of the DRHA feature that we have is you set up the configurations. If there's an interruption caused by the storage, whether it's short or long, we're going to absorb that. End user will never notice that that thing had a blip. Now, let's be fair. I don't break the laws of physics. You know, if the user has in cache their Excel spreadsheet and they want to start working on their Microsoft Access database and that's not in cache, I don't magically make that appear, right? You would have to have some continuity to get to that, but they would be able to continue doing all the things they were doing prior to that. You do not want to use this for storage maintenance, right? I take it down on Friday, bring it back up on Sunday, and nobody complains, right? You want to use this to absorb those interruptions. So offline access, this is the one that I find pretty interesting, right? I can get my users out there. You know, we have data in the wild. If a user loses a laptop, what are we doing to protect it? How do I get it restored? La-di-da, la-di-da. Well, now you would have that opportunity. So when they connect to the wire, they would resync, and all their data would be stored in a secondary location. So it gives that ability to do that. Another interesting use case is, hey, I've got a laptop with 500 gig of storage, but I need a terabyte of whatever, right? We could optimize that so that you could keep the majority of that out in the cloud and only bring down what they're absolutely utilizing as local cache. Storage profile or profile storage moves, right? These are very, very complex. For us, they become very, very easy. I configure a new location in the registry. When everything's replicated, I basically just shut down the old one. I can't talk to it anymore. It starts failing over to the new one, and boom, you're done, right? That could be your in-house to your out-of-house. That could be Azure to AWS. It doesn't matter to us. It gives you that capability to make that happen. And then last but not least, being able to do globally redundant DR, right? Literally, you decide, what do you want to have? A follow the sun methodology, you want hot sites, whatever it is, you're just adding a location of where you want this alternate data stream to go so that when the user logs in, everything is presented to them just like it was before, okay? You can switch the primary. This was an interesting use case by one of our very large customers that had a lot of feedback into this. They want to be able to say, AWS is charging, I'm going to use round numbers, a nickel a transaction today, and Azure's charging 3 cents today. I'm going to make all operations go out of Azure, right? And then up tomorrow, AWS is at 2 cents a transaction. I might want to flip over to them, right? And giving me the ability to optimize what my user is doing based on the location of the data and the pricing model, et cetera, et cetera. Last piece, the migration, right? I need to get my on-prem desktops out to a DAS provider, whether I'm hybrid or whatever, it's a backup scenario, whatever it is, right? I can now start to enable that story by utilizing the features of the Cloud Cache component, right? So it gives me that flexibility so that I can do some pretty interesting and cool things with that. So you got two options, the built-in one, right? Let's highlight on that real quick. It's local cache, right, on your local on-prem data store, okay, that you would enable. So I have my storage location. I would enable, the front-end cache of it, but it's all in-house, right? Fixes my storage continuity problems, right? Makes that very, very fault-tolerant. Reduces some of my I/O costs, right? Reduces my file server load, right? Which ultimately is going to save me money down the path that I'm going down, right? All included with profile containers and and ODFC containers. The add-on module, you'll be able to do multiple locations. You can do simultaneous use locations, right? And this really starts to give us a better storage story. We can do live on the fly backups, right? We can do location moves. I can do DR. I can do cloud desktops, right? It gives me that flexibility to do all those cool things. Now, the disclosure I need to get is everything is subject to change. Okay, our official pricing and packaging will be announced at GA. We currently have several of our very, very large customers that are doing testing, and we are opening up as of today additional testing. So if you would like to sign up for the beta, you're more than welcome to. If you go to FSLogix.com and register for the beta, you'll be able to get set up, actually, quote unquote, tech preview. Old school, I still call them betas, and get in there and play around with what's going on with this cloud driver. So with that, I want to turn it over to Q&A from Tobias and answer any questions that might be there.
This is really exciting stuff. Thank you so much, Dave. Above all, a lot of people, when they're thinking about either moving to the cloud or smartly leveraging resources in the cloud, they think more about servers in terms of, how many servers do I need? How much storage do I need? How many virtual CPUs do I need, and so forth. But one of the aspects that I think you so eloquently highlighted is that there's this kind of hidden thing of the data transfer. And by minimizing the amount of flow of data back and forth, you can leverage some potentially very, very large cost savings. So that's really, really exciting. One, I guess, related question was, for any of these access rules that you were talking about earlier, I assume that you can use Active Directory security groups, or how much flexibility is there in the configuration of those?
So in general, the configuration for the access groups for applications is access groups, right? Security groups, AD ones. For Cloud Cache, it's literally going to be a registry setting. So you'll go in and say, hey, this group goes to AWS, storage XYZ. This group goes to Azure, storage ABC. So that is all going to be in, whether it's registry via GPO or GPP or script. It's up to you on how you want to do it. That will all be in there.
Great. One thought that just came to mind myself is, a lot of government agencies have, of course, restrictions on where data are allowed to be pushed to in terms of storage. My question would be, if you have sensitive data, for example, that only can be stored on premises for whatever reason, would you have some kind of an exclusion rule set possible, such that, for example, even if I'm a subscriber to AWS or Azure or Google Cloud or Oracle or whatever, that I could prevent those specific data from being replicated off premises?
Yeah, so as we start to look at that, we can set up our per user and group settings. So let's just say you're in a multi-MLS type environment, where and we're just going to pretend that you're doing FUI information into AWS, but you need classified information, which is a different login, to go to a different directory, different location, right? Different storage infrastructure, you're accessing different machines. We could literally put the rules in place that same image, right? And when you log in with your FUI access, right, it says, hey, you're allowed to save data to AWS. But when you log in with your other credentials, it would go to a different location. Those two, and I'm not saying that you would cross the wires or the swords, as we call it. Those would be the same image running in remote locations. right? Or remote instances where I have one set of users logging into one side, one set of users logging into the other side.
That makes total sense. Great. I think we're pretty much at the end of the questions that I was able to collect.
Okay.
So thank you.
I'd like to add one more thing, Tobias.
Of course,
those of you guys that want to see the XenApp blog announcement where Kevin, our CEO, Doug, our product manager, and Gabe, our product marketing manager, I think I got all of everybody's titles right. They did a great 1 hour session that was all focused on this. So Stephanie's going to send the link out for everybody listening so you guys can go listen to that also, because there is some additional information in there and different commentary from different perspectives. I wanted to get as much into this session as I could, and I didn't want us to run 3 hours. So that was the last plug on that, and I'll turn it over to you, Tobias.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dave. Very much appreciated. Very exciting, not only standardized products, but this new CCD announcement, I think, is going to be, in particular, very, very interesting to those who do a lot of cloud-based or even hybrid types of environments. And also, thanks to you, Kevin, for chiming in earlier. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Stephanie.
All right, thank you, Tobias. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Dave. Lots of good stuff. I put that link in the chat, but it looks a little bit crazy. So I probably can include it in our follow-up email that will come out to you tomorrow. I'll have some other links for you to the videos that we talked about earlier as well. And I can put those in the follow-up email and see, yeah, you'll be able to get to those then. So just really quickly wrapping up before I let you guys go, just a reminder, I know some of you may have opted in for a chance to win an Amazon gift card. The winner will be selected off the air, so to speak. So we'll have FSLogix will randomly select the winner, and we'll notify that person, and then we'll make the announcement on Twitter and at mycugc.org. You'll see that in the link. One of the links I put in the chat earlier is to a forum thread for today's webinar, so we'll announce that there. And that's also the place that if you do have more questions, please feel free to type them in the forum thread, and we'll make sure that Kevin and Dave see those questions and get you some answers.
Sorry for the interruption, Stephanie. We have some folks asking if Dave and or Kevin could provide an email address for contact, please, or should users just use the generic email address?
So you can use the generic. That actually goes in their system so nothing gets lost. Now, I highly encourage you to use the generic at sales@fslogix.com. If you're too shy to use the generic, reach out and send one to kbrown@fslogix.com, and Kevin will coordinate all that communication so that we make sure we don't miss anything.
It's just K Brown, not K.Brown.
Just K Brown. KB.
Yep. K Brown.
There you go.
And just for everybody listening, this is not Kevin and I's first roadshow in the Fed space, the Gov space. So we understand a lot of your challenges, and we're there to help you with those. Kevin is based in Reston, okay? So he's in Northern Virginia, and I pretty much have an apartment at the Hilton there. So I'm there often, and we can make sure that whether you're out of DC or you're out of one of the surrounding areas, we'll get to you. We know how this game is played.
All right, and finally, for those of you who will be at Synergy next week, just please come find us. We'll be at the CUGC booth, which is in the Community Hub at Synergy Park. And if you have not already registered to come to our pregame party, I hope you will. You can get to us at the address on the screen, and we hope to see you all there. All right, I think that it's about time to wrap up. So thanks again. Thanks to everyone who attended. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Dave. And thank you, Tobias, for checking on those questions and keeping us up to date on those.
You bet. My pleasure. Thank you all for your participation today. Much appreciated.
Yep. Thank you all.
All right.
Thanks, Tobias.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you at mycugc.org or at Synergy next week. Thanks. Bye.